Summer is just around the corner, and so too is hurricane season. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci at the Press of Atlantic City. Welcome to the Something in the Air podcast. Since it is hurricane season, I had to bring on somebody who is behind a lot of what we talk about when we talk about what's ahead over the next couple of months. What is the hurricane forecast? Today we have Jordan Jones. She's a PhD student at Colorado State University. And yeah, we're going to talk about Colorado and hurricanes too in the interview, but she's telling us about the hurricane forecast, what goes into it, the new changes for 2021, plus her journey from Jamaica to Colorado. So really cool interview. I enjoyed it. I think you're going to learn a lot about hurricane season, a lot about what goes into these kind of forecasts. It's not just something you kind of whip together and throw out there. It takes a lot of time, and she said even months of research for here. So without further ado, let's turn it over to her, Jordan Jones. This is the Something in the Air podcast. All right, and now is the time we've all been waiting for. We're going to find everything out about the 2021 hurricane forecast. Plus, we're also going to hear about the life of someone who makes this forecast happen. She's joined with us here today. Jordan Jones, PhD candidate at Colorado State University. She works with the hurricane forecasting team. You are coming to us all the way from Fort Collins, Colorado. I think you are the furthest person we've ever had for this podcast. So welcome. How's it going?
Thank you. And it's going great.
Beautiful. I have to ask, first question off the top here. If you had to describe the 2020 hurricane season in one or two words, what would you describe it as?
Exhausting.
Exhausting. Yeah. A record-breaking season for the Atlantic Hurricane Basin, not just with the number of named storms, but with the number of storms that made landfall in the U.S. Here in South Jersey, we had two of those. Well, really one. Tropical Storm Faye made landfall, and then we had Isaias, which made a close pass by. Do you remember any of those two storms? Any special memories from those? I know they were fairly low on the totem pole compared to what else happened.
That is true. I shouldn't say so, because all storms are important. And unfortunately, no, I don't have any special tidbits for those storms. They happened at a time when there was this sort of lull in the season, and we were all just sort of on eggshells, just waiting for this this season to pass. And thankfully, Faye and Isaias did not become like the storms that we expected it to, especially since we had incredibly warm sea surface temperatures, even for New Jersey and the extratropics, the extratropical U.S. East Coast. So just thankful that we got out of 2020 relatively. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, but people are definitely impacted.
Yeah. I mean, for us, we did have, unfortunately, one person did pass away from rip currents in Faye, but, overall, Faye was a fairly tame storm. I mean, it was a pretty much one big rainstorm for half a day, and then that was it. I mean, it was a little bit breezy. I was outside in Brigantine, which is just north of Atlantic City, when the eye passed right nearby, and it was mostly cloudy and people were jet skiing while the eye was going nearby. I'm like, this is something you don't see all the time. And then Isaias did bring two tornadoes here to South Jersey, but like you said, it could have been worse. This wasn't a Sandy situation for us here. That's the one that we're always going to talk about until the next Sandy comes. But for a record-breaking season, it's encouraging to hear those words that obviously it could have been worse, and fortunately was not. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. You come from Jamaica all the way to Colorado. So how does that happen? And let me ask, growing up in Jamaica, how did the weather influence, you making your career decision to get into weather as a career?
Yeah. So I had a really roundabout way of getting there. Jamaica doesn't exactly have this specialized or well-known department for climate and weather, right? We have a physics department, and they do climate physics. And I did not really think that I would end up in atmospheric science, to be honest. I did my master's in Jamaica, which was about climate change and hurricanes. And I read a lot of research coming out of Colorado State. So I already knew about Phil Klotzbach. I already knew about William Gray. And essentially, I was just, that's what I was going for, right? Just to be able to work with Phil Klotzbach is a great honor already, to work with these people that have been working on this legendary and one of the oldest seasonal forecasts. It's just great. So I think that's your first question.
No, and just for everybody here, Dr. Klotzbach and Dr. Gray are probably on the Mount Rushmore of hurricane forecasters. Would that be fair to say? I think they're definitely in the top four. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're working with the team, which is definitely something to brag about. It's very prestigious, and I tell people all the time, when we look at hurricane forecasts, the two that I'm, I would say trust the most are NOAA, government, and Colorado State. And one question people tell me is like, why Colorado State? I mean, you're first of all, like, it's landlocked, and second of all, it's not even like landlocked near the Atlantic Ocean. It's landlocked near the Pacific Ocean. So how does that happen? And then I want you to get back to the second question. I apologize. Just growing up on the island, how did weather influence you wanting to, your interest in weather? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So Colorado State University, actually, the Department of Atmospheric Science is like this hub of some of the founding fathers and mothers of tropical meteorology, right? Herbert Rail, Dick Johnson, Joanne Simpson. These people came through Colorado State, and they have gone on to, if you can consider the academic family tree, then it has produced a lot of alumni that have gone on to do great research in tropical meteorology. So Colorado State's Department of Atmospheric Science, along with, I think, the University of Chicago, are just one of those big names in tropical meteorology, because they have essentially written all of the textbooks on tropical meteorology. So why is it in Colorado State? I have no idea. I really don't. There was just this perfect hill that is in Colorado that was on Colorado State's land, and one of the founding fathers of the department said, "Okay, we're going to put it there," and they built that whole department on that hill. It's also very close to NCAR, which is the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And, there's also NOAA there as well. So they have Colorado is like this hub, this mecca for atmospheric research. And, in Colorado, the weather changes so quickly. There's just so many phenomena to look at. So, why not add hurricanes to the list?
I guess not. Yeah, why not? So a little bit different than growing up in Jamaica, then, I would say.
Yeah, definitely very different. I was not ready for the dry air. I'm definitely from 80% humidity. But to your question about my love and my growing interest for weather and climate, I didn't really start out in climate and weather. So we're the tropics. We know about hurricanes, it's a livelihood for us at this moment. One hurricane's come through and, it's just like another day. But it was so interesting that I was in high school when Hurricane Ivan in 2004 rolled through, and the eye wall, I think, skirted over us. So we saw that cool phenomena where the winds go one way and then they move another way. And it was just terribly impactful, right? In more ways than one. But, it was this phenomena that happens to us literally all the time. We even have songs about it. We have a song about Hurricane Gilbert, which I cannot sing.
That was gonna be my next question.
Let's just take that idea to read it right now.
All right.
But Yeah, we're just so intimate with hurricanes and what can happen after hurricanes with the impacts that, it was just something to be pursued, really. The study of hurricanes and how to predict hurricanes and whether or not we can do that ourselves in the Caribbean.
So let me ask, I guess,
Mhm.
obviously hurricanes are pretty much a way of life. Were you, what were your thoughts on how we perceive hurricanes in the United States when you came here? Was there any difference in how, people, again, people in the United States would think about hurricanes and people in
Mhm.
Jamaica, or was it about the same?
Yeah, that's also another interesting thing about Colorado. I'm not sure what it's like in New Jersey, but Americans do have this incredible enthusiasm for weather. Like, you will know about a hurricane, but you will run to it.
People have a little more interest in knowing what's going to happen this season. So, how long does it take to make this hurricane forecast? If you had to add up the hours between you and the other two members on the team.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's like a specific set of time. First of all, Phil Klotzbach is essentially the one putting together the document and the statistics and the models. And there are three or four major components of that forecast. One, you're looking at historical records, and you're looking at past seasons, and that is a statistical model, which requires like um, historical or previous patterns in climate and in ocean and atmosphere that tell us what could happen next. Then there is the dynamical models, which comes from Europe's ECMWF, or their European dynamical model. And that tells us what's going to happen with El Nino or La Nina phenomena. And then you have past seasons, which we call analogs, and they're essentially what we're trying to do is to try and pick those seasons that have similarities to what we are predicting using both the statistical and the dynamical models. So there's a lot of a lot of things going into it, and it's not just Phil or Michael or me. There are people also that's affiliated. There are people who contribute a lot to those calculations as well. And you know, it does take a long while to build that. It will probably take like a month to put the entire document together, but for anything else extraneous, it does take a little longer.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said it because sometimes people think that a weather forecast is the same as a hurricane forecast, and I'm like, no, no, no. Like a weather forecast, you're putting together in an hour or an hour and a half. I said this is something that takes a lot of time, and it takes multiple people to do it. So I'm glad that you said it here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a brief break, and then when we come back, we're gonna talk about the 2021 hurricane forecast here for the Atlantic Ocean in New Jersey. This is the Something in the Air podcast. And we are back, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Something in the Air podcast here at the Press of Atlantic City and produced by Stockton University. Join with me, someone from Colorado State University, all the way out west, Jordan Jones. She's a PhD student at Colorado State University, specializing in hurricane forecasts. And we are going to get to the moment that I think many people on this podcast who are listening have been waiting for, which is what is the actual forecast for 2021? Please don't let it be as bad as last year. Please don't let it be as bad as last year. So tell us, will it be as active as last year? Is that what you believe the forecast will be?
Okay, so good news, no, not as
That's
bad as
good.
2020. Bad news is that we do still expect it to be particularly active or above normal active. And what that really means is that we expect 17 named storms, 8 hurricanes, 4 of which may be major hurricanes. And that also means that we expect an accumulated cyclone energy unit or value of 100 and I think 150
150, I
units.
think, is what you have. And just explain for everybody and we call it the ACE in the rotor
Right.
world, what
Yeah.
the ACE is.
It's cool, or at least it sounds cool, but it's actually not.
Yeah.
So it is a metric or an index that combines the duration of a storm. It combines the intensity of a storm, therefore how large or how high the wind speeds are, and it also takes into account the frequency. So how many storms are have actually formed, and higher than 111 units of ACE is actually incredibly active, right? Or normal active.
Yeah.
Actually, let me take that back. It is above normal,
Right.
which means that the likelihood of being impacted by a storm, whether it's tropical storm or not, can still be pretty bad. Which is why Joe, you probably also noticed that all the percentages of the landfalling probabilities have increased for literally everyone across
Yeah.
the Gulf of Mexico and the U.S. East Coast.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll jump into that. And, our 4 counties here along the coast, Cape May, Atlantic, Ocean, and Monmouth, are all above average. On average, for a hurricane to pass within 50 miles, which is not that far, if you guys, thinking about, we're talking about from about Manahawkin down the Parkway to about Avalon. Jordan, I know you know. Well, to have you here one day, and I'll take you from Manahawkin down to Avalon, but about 50 miles, not that far. On average, is a 6% risk for all of the coastal counties except for Monmouth, which is a 3. This year, we're almost doubling that. You have a 10% risk for Cape May, Atlantic, and Ocean, and a 6% chance for Monmouth. And what I want you to explain, this is a little more philosophical, but what does that 10% actually mean? Like, should people be concerned? Should people not be concerned? Because it's more than average, but it's still relatively low risk.
That is true. Yes. So we tend to calculate the landfalling probabilities by taking into consideration all of the hurricane stats for all of the storms that have impacted you in the past, and it does work out to be a pretty low percentage, but
Yeah.
it also means that if we double that, you've been impacted by one storm, just one storm, like Hurricane Sandy in 2012. It means that even if you have just one storm, it doesn't tell you what the impacts could be. Like, for instance, if a storm decided to sit over New Jersey for an extended period of time, that landfalling probability would not be able to classify or to tell you about that, right? It only tells you what has happened in the past. And by Hurricane Sandy that, extremes do happen even in hurricanes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, comparing to last year, right, we had our 2 tropical storms. I think people would take those 2 tropical storms rather than one hurricane, or really it was a post-tropical cyclone, but we won't go there. But one hurricane to make landfall. And just to give people a kind of what we're working with here, so we said on average, right, 6%, for a lot of these counties along the shore. Miami-Dade County in Florida is 23% risk. Palm Beach County is 22% risk. Just to give you an idea of what we're working with here. When you're looking at these, these forecasts, could you talk a little bit about geography and hurricanes? Because I think people, and myself included, we tend to maybe not always think about like where you actually are on planet Earth, determines your risk of landfall. Like if you're jutting out into the ocean,
Right.
for example, or if you're not. Could you talk about that, from an East Coast perspective?
Sure. So hurricanes have this general path that happens. We're talking about just basic here.
Yeah.
So it will travel generally from the coast of Africa straight across to the Atlantic, to the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and somewhere within the Gulf of Mexico, it starts to naturally curve north. And interestingly enough, it follows, that US East Coast trajectory, really, right? And that is for a number of reasons. For one, it's easier for it to literally coast along the coast because land for it is pretty bad. Dry air from across the continental US forces it to move along the coast as well. So if you do jot out a lot, depending on whether or not the hurricane or the extratropical storm is that near to the coast, you will definitely be impacted by it. Most storms tend to fizzle out by then because you have a lot of shear, which is essentially just imposing winds in different directions that tears that storm apart. But there are also storms that have an incredibly strong or resilient vortex. And it doesn't matter if you're jutting out or, relatively protected by coast, you will still be impacted. Just depends on how intense that storm is and how well it transforms into an extratropical storm.
Sure. And just going back to New Jersey again, I mean, Monmouth County has half the average, on average, half the risk. Mm-hmm. And that's because if you think about New Jersey, everybody, Ocean County kind of protects Monmouth a little bit. If a storm's going from south to north, it's going to hit Ocean County before it even gets into Monmouth. So that's why it's a little bit lower. It doesn't mean the impacts won't be bad.
Right.
Look at Sandy, it made landfall right north of Atlantic City. To the north of there is where we saw the strongest damage, as opposed to the south. But, just give you an idea of that. When, we talk about this kind of, hurricane season, are there any times, that we're looking for an unusually active period? Obviously your September, October is very active. Are there any times that you could point out that would, hey, be on more alert than usual?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So one very reliable pattern is the El Nino La Nina phenomena. If you do have a strong, sustained La Nina, there is definitely going to be above average hurricane activity. The second thing is if we have extremely warm sea surface temperatures going into the hurricane season, if we just exactly like 2020, we started the year off with these really warm sea surface temperatures, and it was sustained well into, November and December. So, just warm sea surface temperatures will encourage hurricane development and hurricane activity in general. So that's number two. Number three is also this idea of vertical wind shear. Therefore, how much resistance is there in the atmosphere in general? And that would impede the motion of hurricanes. If it is lower over the North Atlantic, which happens during La Nina events, then yes, we are definitely going to see some powerful hurricanes. But if we have more resistance, more vertical wind shear, then we'll very likely see a suppression of hurricane activity.
Gotcha. So just to recap for everybody again, just to give everybody the forecast here. Forecasting 17 named storms. Out of those 17, 8 would be hurricanes. Those are maximum sustained winds of over 74 miles an hour. And then out of those 8, 4 of them would be major hurricanes, category 3 out of 5 or greater here. Turning into some changes that the National Hurricane Center have for this year, I think the major one is that we are done with the Greek alphabet. We are taking that and we are throwing it out, and we're never going to see it again. In its place, we're going to have just a reusable, we'll say, regular list of hurricane names. Just tell me your opinion on that. And what you felt going later into the season where we were using these Greek names. I think we had Theta and Eta at the same time, which probably sounds a little confusing. And some of them we had to retire because they were so impactful that we had to retire. So there was a little conundrum with that. So just tell me what your opinion is on that. And if you know the story, just like what the story is about retiring these Greek hurricane names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in general, naming hurricanes is actually, or the entire system is actually pretty confusing. They start off with, I think, at least 4 years of defined names for the next 4 seasons. But when you have a particularly extreme season, that tends to spill over into the Greek alphabet. The problem with the Greek alphabet, though, is that you can't retire, a Greek letter, right? No, it's not like it's a name, so you can't really replace it. So that was one of the issues with it. But on the other side of it, it has been a pretty good indicator of when we've had very active, very extreme seasons, right? 2005 is literally the only other example of us going into the Greek alphabet. And in general, what they're going to do is that they're going to set up another list that, one, they can retire in case something goes wrong, or we have an extreme Greek alphabet storm that they can retire. Yes, let's hoping that we don't. I think that has been their rationale, that they have to be able to retire storms that have caused too much damage.
Got it. Well, thanks for your input there. And, last question before we wrap up, I got to know, what's the story with these donuts you guys do when you release your hurricane forecast? And where do you get the donuts from? They look pretty good. You can go on Twitter. You can go on Twitter and see this if you look up Phil Klotzbach's Twitter account. I think he always tweets it out every time. But go ahead. Tell me the donut story and how were they this year?
I have no idea how it started, but it definitely started with William Gray. He had the donut tradition. He also had the bell tradition for ringing it exactly on August 1st, or is it 23rd? To sort of highlight.
I don't know. I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah, it's sort of to highlight the start of the peak hurricane season. Phil Klotzbach did take on that donut tradition, and he's probably the best person to ask about that. And he also owes me donuts. So
he owes you donuts. What happened?
Owe me donuts.
Were you guys not together?
He said he owes me.
Were you guys not together for the hurricane forecast this year? Is that why he owes you donuts?
Yeah, because we're working from home, so there's really no. And to answer your question about where the donuts come from, I'm pretty sure it's just like regular store-bought donuts. So any donut will do.
I didn't know if he was, rolling the donuts early in the morning for everybody and putting sprinkles on top.
No, I don't know. Maybe he has a famous, maybe he has like a favorite donut that he buys. So.
Well, we'll have to go over there one day and figure it out.
Yeah, and have donuts.
Well, Jordan, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us about hurricane season. Before we wrap up, you want to tell people how they can follow you or follow the team as we go through hurricane season?
Sure. So we are all on Twitter. You can follow us at either Phil J. Klotzbach on Twitter, or you can follow me at Jordan J. I'm a pretty easy person to look up if you can remember the spelling of my name. So yeah, we're all there.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thank you again for the time. We appreciate it. Hopefully hurricane season goes off very smoothly here. No major impacts, and we'll talk with you soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks everybody for listening to the Something in the Air podcast. We'll be back with you the first Wednesday of June, recapping New Jersey State climatologist Dr. Dave Robinson and I's birthday month. We're going to talk all about the month of May and weather here across South Jersey. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts or at thepressafac.com/weather.